welcome to the TV Trash Summer Spectacular, and welcome to the Summer of Reading!
Take a look, it's in a book, a reading rainbow. A reading rainbow.
I've been a bookworm for most of my life, as you can probably tell. Heck, I actually won a school-wide super reader contest in the first grade by such a wide margin, they never held the contest again. Not that I'm bragging or anything. But let's be honest, even those of us who knew what perusing over the written pages does to the imagination have still always wondered, what if we could actually see our favorite stories with our own eyes? And adapting written stories to video has been a thing ever since there's been video. Results have definitely varied over the years. Which is why this year's Summer Spectacular is all about direct TV adaptations of literature. We'll take a look at all of these made-for-TV series and movies, see how they differentiate from the original print material, and determine if what they did for the small screen was a good or bad thing. So let's get started with The Lost World! Wait, whoops, no, not that one! This one. Yeah, when you hear the words The Lost World, chances are you will first think of the direct sequel to Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park, a series that of course Steven Spielberg adapted into what would eventually become a huge movie franchise that has definitely been hit and miss. However, there was another Lost World story released almost 80 years before Crichton's first Jurassic Park was put to print, and it was written by one person you might never have expected. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle never really wanted to be known as just the creator of Sherlock Holmes, hence his unsuccessful attempt to kill off the character in 1893. The man clearly had an interest in science fiction and hoped to be as successful in that genre as Jules Verne and H.G. Wells. In 1912, a year before releasing his actual final Sherlock Holmes novel, Doyle published the first of a new series based on a whole new character, Professor Challenger, and his adventures into the strange and fantastical worlds no one else dared go. There have been other adaptations of this work, including one movie released in 1960, another made just a year before Spielberg's Jurassic Park movie, and a 2001 British TV movie that starred Bob Hoskins of all people as Professor Challenger. But just before that British movie came a full television series loosely based off of Sir Arthur's novel. Emphasis on loosely. It's not very clear who exactly is the main person responsible for this show's creation, as original development involved no less than 4 different production companies, including one group that called itself Cootie Hayes Productions. But as we will see, it is a pretty good guess that the creators were not only trying to lure in viewers who had been absorbed into Spielberg's Crichton adaptations, but were also trying to capitalize on the rise of fantasy action TV shows of the time like Hercules and Xena. Unlike those shows who were syndicated, the Lost World show was basically made as an attempt to sell satellite packages. The pilot movie aired on DirecTV in February 1999, then re-aired on TNT 2 months later, only for the rest of the first season to be exclusively on the satellite service when it started up in October of that year. Because one TV series based off of an obscure novel from the 1910s is certainly enough to get people to pay $50 a month for a satellite service, right? Let's just see if 1999's The Lost World would have possibly made that worth it. So the pilot opens up with... Spielberg's version? After one of the longest title sequences I can recall, seriously, this was one of the few times I actually decided to use the skip intro button, we move to the attacked man dying and being found by this group of natives and researchers who are joined by Professor George Challenger, whom the dying man essentially bequeaths his journal notes to, along with photographic plates showing strange but familiar-looking beasts.
He says the man visited the other world. He went where living men are not meant to go.
I believe the place is known as Oklahoma. We move forward to London, where Challenger addresses the Society of Scientists and Professors he is part of, specifically to call out his colleague, Professor Summerlee, and his skepticism toward prehistoric life still existing.
If he had never been to North America, I'm sure he would still hold that the world is flat.
Well, except that by this time, actual physical proof and testimony has shown that the Earth is indeed round. I mean, you think people just refuse to believe hard evidence? That joke may have made more sense 10 years ago. Summerlee agrees to join Challenger on a quest to prove his beliefs. Also joining them will be the ruggish Lord John Roxton, along with this guy.
Ned Malone, sir. The International Herald Tribune. I have experience as a war correspondent and would serve as an unprejudiced witness.
You are an American.
Yes, sir.
Well, we won't hold that against you.
And already we are delving into the creative liberties. In the original book, Professor Challenger was not quite as accepting right off the bat toward Edward Malone. He in fact physically threw Malone out of his office because assaulting reporters was kind of his hobby, and only agreed to let Malone join his endeavors when Malone chose not to press charges. Not that Malone was that altruistic of an individual either, because he only dared take on Challenger in order to get nookie. Speaking of, while all this had been going on, we've also been cutting back and forth to this woman who is just walking the streets of early 20th century London at night alone, which seems not smart, especially when she gets cornered by an actual assassin. Okay, never mind. Oh, and for the reason someone took out a contract on this woman's life, you guessed it, not explained. And then she shows up at the sausage fest that is this society meeting to up and declare she will fund Challenger's expedition. So, how did she know Challenger's plans? Has she been stalking him? This is Marguerite Crew, an heiress who is apparently willing to throw away her fortune on adventure. Yeah, she's freaking Goldie Gold.
Another reason the others are here. For Challenger, it's a quest for knowledge. Summerlee pride. Malone's looking for the story of the century, and I'm sure you know why I'm here.
To irritate and bore?
Really? What are you after?
Oh, come on, isn't it obvious? She's here to provide titillation by bathing in the river, as well as providing sexual tension for Mr. Roxton, while everyone else camps and feasts at... Okay, where the frack did that table come from? They're in the middle of the jungle in 1919! I know you guys are ripping off Xena where anachronisms were the rage, but give me a break! So after Roxton wrestles an alligator to try and impress Marguerite...
It's called a caiman.
Whatever. The party eventually finds the plateau they've been seeking and build a hot air balloon to sail up to the top, because I guess having them all climb the cliff like in the book would risk Marguerite not looking pretty. But they crash the balloon somewhere within the lost world, and Malone is almost eaten by something that brings back my Jumanji nightmares. What? Those giant flowers were freaking disturbing! I was 15 when that movie came out! I don't have issues! And here's where we get the #1 selling point for this series. Oh, you thought it was the dinosaurs the creators expected people to tune in for? You silly geese, it's her!
You good Lord, man, this isn't Edgar Rice Burroughs. You don't expect her to understand English, do you?
Well, my French is a little rusty, but I'm willing to give it a try. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Veronica.
Okay, that actually got a chuckle out of me. But guess what? Just like Marguerite before her, this character was not in the book. 2 guesses as to why she's in the show. And no, I can't even call her a Sheena knockoff because the Sheena series with Gina Lee Nolan came out a year later. Yes, there was a movie, an older TV show, and comics on that character before, but I highly doubt these writers did that much research. Besides, do they really need the excuse of ripping off another TV show to feature a hot blonde in a 2-piece? Despite Veronica's warnings of the dangers in the world, including the ape man, Challenger is determined to not only get his own photographic proof of the dinosaur's existence, but also needs Roxton to help him steal a dinosaur egg himself. Meanwhile, it turns out that Marguerite did have an ulterior motive of some sort, searching for rare minerals in this lost world to make into jewelry, I think. Look, writers, you can show this character as someone willing to risk her own life to find rocks in a place no one knows about, rather than take over some mine in Africa where she'd use slave labor, but that still doesn't make her likable. Okay, when I first started reading up on this series, I thought it was a one-shot that for the most part was going to play out the story of the original book over the course of 1 season, even with its creative liberties. Turns out that's not the case, especially upon discovering the show had 3 seasons. How did they drag it out that long? By pretty much making it impossible for the adventurers to get out of the Lost World, especially after the second part of the 2-hour movie pilot has Marguerite try to get this one tribe show them the way out in exchange for Veronica marrying the chief, which naturally Veronica is not very keen on. The whole thing falls apart and thus becomes the recurring plot point of everyone trying to find their own way out. So yeah, the goal of our intrepid band of adventurers has become not to just bring back proof of this lost prehistoric world, but is more a never-ending battle to get out at home at all, while escaping the dangers of not only the dinosaurs, but the other humanoid tribes that live here. Yep, the show is basically Land of the Lost, with boobs. And oh boy, do they run with that concept far beyond what Sid and Marty Krofft would have imagined. The rest of the first season was crazy enough, having the group encounter lizard men, giant insects, and the mummified corpse of King Ramses. But then the crazy train really goes off the rails in the second season. In addition to one where the group finds an old English village in the Lost World, there are also episodes involving aliens, dragons, werewolves, and freaking airships. Did J.J. Abrams watch this show and get ideas? For what it's worth, by the end of the first season, the producers gave up on the whole DirecTV exclusivity thing, and the second and third seasons were moved into regular syndication. There were plans for a 4th season that would have included, get this, guest appearances from Sherlock Holmes and Professor Moriarty. But funding for another season fell through, and as a result, the show ended on a pretty big cliffhanger, possibly on the level of Alf and Daredevil. Sadly, there is no such online petition to revive this show. Which doesn't really surprise me, because this show could be a great argument against public domain! As its own entity, the show is not terrible. It's pretty clear the writers had a lot of fun just throwing in as much ridiculousness as they could, and that did result in what could be a guilty pleasure for many. I just question why they would tie it into one of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's lesser-known works, especially if they were going to deviate from the source material this much. Maybe they thought the concept had potential to be expanded on in ways Sir Doyle didn't think of, But given that Doyle did write more books about Professor Challenger, that's not necessarily true. I guess it does have its fans, because out-of-print copies of the show's DVD release can get pretty pricey on the online market. Though the whole series is free to all Amazon Prime members as of this video's posting. Even if you do enjoy this show, I still recommend you check out the original book. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle really is underappreciated as a fantasy writer, and does deserve more praise for his work outside of Sherlock Holmes. Still, this is far from the only example of British fantasy literature that was botched with a TV series adaptation. Oh yes, my rowdy friends. Next time on the Summer Spectacular, don't panic.